Thank you very much, Edgar, and good evening, everybody. First, let me help my dear brother Edgar out with the protocols. The Premier, Alan Winde, it's very nice to see you, Mr. Premier. Let me also welcome the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, Professor Mamo Getty Pakeng. Am I pronouncing it correct? Very well. Professor Edgar PSC, the founder of the African Center for Cities. Thank you very much for all of what you do. And as I look around, I see so many people that I actually know, and they are all my elderly mentors and so on supporters. And I look around and I see these women that seem to run the world. And, I see my big sister, Professor Mampela Rampele, who used to also be Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town. So it seems that you guys love women as Vice Chancellors of the university. I see my big sister there, Dr. Zuma, Dlamini Zuma, who actually was the one who came up with this issue of the Africa we want. And I remember she and myself going to, with big sister, going to, I think it was Mozambique. We went when you started that. So it's very nice to see you tonight. And I also see Louisa, who is a phenomenal leader for Africa that is here. You know, these women around the world, so please give it up to them. Thank you. And of course, if I come to South Africa, there's one person I always ask about first. That's Trevor Manuel. And Trevor has been an incredible Minister of Finance and a leader in Africa. Trevor, it's very nice to see you. And I'm also delighted that we have so many, all the mayors, here. And so let's just welcome you warmly. I'm delighted to be here with you. And as I was looking around, we were taking all the pictures. I was counting how many men are mayors and how many women. And I saw, I think you almost have some kind of a balance in there. I think we need a lot more women mayors in Africa. And it meant you're okay, don't get me wrong. But I think that it's great to see that. And I was asking Jamie Cooper, now I'll talk about Jamie in a second. She doesn't like to be talked about much, but I will talk about you. But I was asking about this particular museum, which is the Z's MOCCA. And as somebody who comes from agriculture, when I see a silo that's been transformed into something like that, I think it's agricultural artistic work. So I'm going to take some of that and begin to think maybe inside of just maybe we can store some grain and maybe we can turn some of them into something like this. Beautiful, beautiful work. So thank you all very much for having me here today. I would like to say I am delighted to be here with you all in this place tonight. When I arrived, I told Jamie Cooper, and she's an incredible global leader. I said, there's only one person that can actually get me to come to this event when I have 30 heads of state and government expecting me tomorrow in Dakar, where I'm organizing under the chairmanship of President Macky Sall, a Feed Africa Summit. But Jamie is Jamie, and she's incredible. And thank you, Jamie. You're the only one who can do that. And of course, Jamie and I work very closely together on the issues of nutrition, malnutrition, and she and I, and the big win philanthropic that you lead, and also the African Development Bank, we work very closely together on matters of malnutrition and stunting Africa. And we set up this thing called the African Leaders for Nutrition, and also this thing called the African President's Roundtable on Nutrition. So thank you, Jamie, and the Big Win Philanthropy, and the University of Cape Town on the development of this African Mayoral Leadership Initiative. As I've said, I see around all of you here, and I am delighted to be here. There's no other place I'd rather be than those who basically lead and manage the places where we live, the places where we work, the places where we thrive. And I think, Edgar, you're actually right. We do quite a lot of things globally with national leaders and so on. But really what's most important are the leaders that are in charge of the places, the cities that we live. And in fact, when I was telling my team, I said, there is absolutely no way I will not be at this event because I wanted to interact with you. And as Edgar was saying, share some perspectives, but listen to you because you run the cities. And I'm actually here, I'm not going to be lecturing you, but I'm going to share perspectives with you. But I want to hear what you think, and I want to hear what your challenges are and the issues that we as African Development Bank can better support. So thank you all for what you do. You as mayors are the custodians of our cities, as I say, where we live and where we work. Therefore, all efforts directed at supporting mayors to improve their human, institutional, and financing capacities to better manage cities will have direct effects on the lives of people. The goal of the Amali program, which is to catalyze the transformation of cities, is central to spurring the overall economic growth and development of Africa. I would like to share my thoughts tonight in 5 major parts. First, I will discuss the importance of cities in Africa's economic growth and development. Second, I will discuss some of the major challenges facing cities and mayors, all of you, as you grapple with many of these challenges. And third, I will share some trends that mayors should focus on as they further improve urban development. Fourth, I will discuss the work of the African Development Bank and the priority that we place on supporting urban development. Fifth, I will close with some areas of priorities for catalyzing transformation of cities. Just so that you know, I think you have some screens around, some of the photos of some of these things. You might see it if you turn your head a little bit in different directions. Urbanization, ladies and gentlemen, is taking place in Africa at a very fast and unprecedented pace, as the Vice Chancellor said. Today, more than 1/4 of the world's 100 fastest growing cities are in Africa. 3 mega cities, Cairo, Kinshasa, and Lagos, have a population of more than 10 million people. Just think about that. Africa is also home to at least 52 cities with over 1 million residents each. Africa is projected to have the fastest urban growth rate in the world at 3.2%. And by 2050, we will have Africa's urban population doubling to about 600 million, from 600 million to 1.2 billion people. By 2050, an additional 950 million people will be living in 13,000 urban centers. What this effectively means is that Africa will be the home to the largest urban population in the world. Large cities bring enormous opportunities for growth and prosperity, provided, of course, that they have the needed urban governance, policies, and infrastructures to allow them to be well managed. We should consider that cities generate 55% of the total GDP of Africa, and this can be expected to increase, given that in many developed countries, cities generate an estimated 90% of the GDP. Cities are also fast-growing consumer markets, driven largely by rapid urbanization. Consumer expenditures in Africa has grown at an annual rate of 3.9% since 2010 to reach $1.4 trillion in 2015. It is expected to reach $2.1 trillion by 2025 and $2.5 trillion by 2030. The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will spur more growth and increase consumer expenditures, which will be driven by higher consumer demand in rapidly growing cities. In view of the enormous contributions of cities to overall economic growth, greater attention is needed to ensure that these economic potentials are fully maximized through better urban planning, urban governance, infrastructure, housing, health, and overall social economic development. We need livable cities. We need healthy cities. We need cities that provide decent and quality work. We need cities that are well fed, like we have been well fed this evening. I like that because my top priority is to feed Africa, and so when I get here and I get fed, well, we're getting the job done somehow. We need secure cities, and we need cities with good quality of life. The rapid urban growth in the early stages of Africa's development has meant that people have been concentrating in the urban areas without the accompanying investment in infrastructure and human capital needed to reap the economic benefits. So much of the urban expansion in Africa is characterized by unplanned and unregulated growth and high unemployment rates. For the most part, the city's jobs are concentrated in the informal sector, with more than 60% of the jobs being in the informal sector, or what we call the gray economy. And that is neither taxed or nor well monitored by governments. Over the past 45 years, investment in infrastructure and housing in Africa has remained at around 20% of the gross domestic product. In contrast, countries in East Asia that experience similar rapid urbanization scaled up their capital investments to over 45% of their gross domestic products, particularly in China. All across East Asia, investment remains above 40% of the gross domestic product, producing significant results in productivity improvements and poverty reduction. However, the chronic lack of investments in Africa has led to fragmented cities and an unsustainable model of urban growth. Additionally, unchecked urban expansion leads to increased emissions, transit costs, the loss of natural resources, and arable land that could have been used for other purposes such as agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the biggest challenge facing cities in the face of massive rural-urban migration and urbanization with rising poverty is lack of affordable and decent housing. The poorly developed mortgage financing market leaves millions unable to afford decent housing. Let me give you some examples. In Uganda, for example, there are an estimated 5,000 mortgages for a population of 41 million people. While in Tanzania, and I know the mayor is here from the two cities in Tanzania, there are only 3,500 mortgages for a population of 55 million people. Recent estimates show that as of 2019, Kenya and Ghana had housing deficits of 2 million units respectively, as the governments can only meet 3% of the housing demand. The African Development Bank has been supporting the expansion of mortgage financing on the continent. Let me cite a few examples. The bank provided $40 million senior loan to the housing investment partners in South Africa to build a portfolio of affordable housing mortgages for eventual securitization on local capital markets using innovative legal structures. It will support low and medium income households to access 1,250 newly built housing units. In Zambia, can I see the mayor from, right there. The bank's loan of $25 million to the Zambia National Building Society will enable the delivery of 667 housing units for low-income and lower middle-income households. In Kenya, how many mayors do we have here from Kenya? Kiambu, governor, and everybody else here? I love Kenya. I lived there for 10 years. Our support of $90 million supported the establishment of the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company. In Ghana, Our $15 million support to the GHL Bank is providing mortgage financing for 300 to 375 families. And in Nigeria, our $50 million support to the Family Homes Fund is helping to boost access to mortgage finance while supporting the issuance of bonds on the local capital market. The bank, I just coming in actually flying here from Togo, where I was with President of Togo, Nasingbe, and we're talking about exactly this issue of the housing because he wants to do 20,000 housing units, and the bank is supporting them in the development of those 20,000 units. Your Excellencies, friends of Africa, ladies and gentlemen, a huge challenge for many cities is the sprawling areas of slums. Two African countries, South Africa and Kenya, figure among countries with the largest slums in the world, with Kayelitsha in Cape Town, Kibera in Nairobi. And I remember speaking with my dear friend, the president of Kenya, President Kenyatta, and of course President Ruto, was close to both of them. And I said, anytime you go on a race and you see three Kenyans on a long-distance race, 5,000 meters, you should pack your spike shoes and go home because they're going to take the gold, the silver, and they would take the bronze. But I say, Your Excellencies, I don't think Kenya should take gold medal in having one of the largest slums in the world. Top 5 countries with the largest slums in Africa also include Kenya, the Mutare slum, and Nigeria, where I come from, Ajegunle, Shomolu, Makoko areas, massive slums, all in Lagos State in Nigeria. Slums have unhealthy living environments, shacks, lack of water and sanitation, and are extremely poor communities. And because of lack of jobs, high levels of poverty, lack of infrastructure, they are highly susceptible to violence, in particular against women, crime, illicit drugs, and health pandemic. We saw that during the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there have been several efforts to do what's called slum upgrading to improve the living conditions in the cities. While I certainly appreciate these efforts, I wish to be clear that I do not believe there's anything like a 5-star slum. A slum is a slum. We must not get comfortable with slums. The abnormal must not become normalized. Governments and cities must have, in my view, zero slum policies. Innovative planning and financing models are needed to dramatically change this. One way this can be done is to completely revamp these areas, develop affordable, decent, and quality housing using the collateralization of the implicitly high land values of those areas to attract private developers. Households, poor as they may be, it doesn't really matter. We all remember Hernando de Soto's point about the mystery of capital, that poor have assets, but they can't turn this, they have a lot of things, but they can't turn it into income for themselves. And it's the same for those that are in the slums. And so if you look at what they have, the implicit value of these areas in urban areas is quite high. And so if they can use that to collateralize and to get private investors to invest in those areas, they can own their own homes. They can also have a share on the development of those estates, and if they don't want to live there, that's fine. But as those estates in those areas develop, their income profile also changes because of that. And I really think this is very, very important because the poor may not have a lot of money, but in many of these areas, they have land equity that can be used to develop affordable housing for them. Some countries such as Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia have achieved remarkable declines in the percentage of their populations living in slums. They have used approaches that are such as highly successful programs in China and in Singapore, based on strong public actions, effective housing finance system, developing well-functioning land markets, and improving urban mobility. For example, the percentage of slum dwellers in Cairo declined from 50% to just 17% in 2 decades. The city of Cairo also auctioned public lands to finance infrastructure programs. Dear mayors, transforming your cities will require significant levels of financing. The African Development Bank is playing its part. On average, the African Development Bank's board approves more than $2 billion a year in projects and programs that have direct impact on urban areas all across Africa. These projects cover a wide range of areas. They include transportation, access to clean water, improvement in sanitation and also in sewage systems, in drainage infrastructure, waste management, climate change adaptation, and energy, as well as financial services. In Tanzania, in 2017, the city of Dar es Salaam received $160 million in funding from the bank for the construction of the phase 2 of the bus rapid transit system. Before this system, Dar es Salaam was one of Africa's most congested cities. Suburban residents spent a significant portion of their income on unreliable public transportation. The bus rapid transit system can transport today 500,000 commuters per day, directly impacting the lives of over 1.2 million regular commuters in the city. Let me turn to Uganda. We are supporting the Kampala Capital City Authority in Uganda in their efforts to revamp the infrastructure of their city with a loan of $264 million. The project includes the rehabilitation and construction of over 60 kilometers of roads, 123 kilometers of walkways, and cycling tracks, as well as improvements in the drainage systems. Additionally, Kampala City Authority will purchase 50 environmentally friendly buses to enhance the city's transportation options. The city of Nairobi, in 2020, completed the Nairobi Outer Ring Road project thanks to a support of $107 million that we provided from the bank to the government of Kenya. This project has resulted in an upgrade of 13-kilometer stretch of carriageway. It includes the provisions for a future medium bus rapid system. And in Senegal, where I'm going to be going tonight, immediately after this talk, I'll be on the plane going straight to Dakar. The African Development Bank has provided 250 million euros to support the development of Jaminajo. Jaminajo is outside of Dakar, and that's where we are going to be having the summit. It's an incredible, beautiful place. We financed the toll road to go there. We financed many of the infrastructure there, and that has actually helped. And we also financed what is called the speed train, the express train in Dakar to actually help with urban mobility. In my own country, Nigeria, in the city of Abuja, we are supporting them to create satellite towns as a means of managing the urban sprawl. Additionally, in Côte d'Ivoire, Madame la Maire vous êtes là. Oui. Please clap for her because she's my host mayor, so we provided a loan of $637 million to finance the Abidjan Urban Transport Project. This project will reduce traffic congestion and solidify Abidjan's position as a key industrial hub. The project will also improve the daily commute of 2 million people, slash the number of accidents by half, and decrease greenhouse emissions. The African Development Bank has been also providing significant support to improve access to water and sanitation systems in the cities across Africa. Between 2015 and 2018, the bank invested over $2.7 billion in urban water and sanitation systems. One notable example is the Kigali Bulk Water Project, the first public-private water partnership in Africa, which is supporting over 500,000 people. In Cairo, Egypt, the bank has supported the development of what is called the Abu Rawash Water Treatment Plant, which treats 1.6 million cubic meters of water per day and serves 9 million people in Greater Cairo. I'm very pleased that this is the largest water treatment plant in Egypt, but not only that, it is one of the 10 largest water treatment plants in the world. Dear mayors, your cities face new challenges. Top on the list is climate change. Africa loses $7 to $15 billion annually due to climate change, and that is projected to rise to $50 billion by 2040. We saw it in the frequency of the cyclones. Louisa is here. You saw what happened with in Mozambique, in Malawi, in Zimbabwe with Idaya, and then there's another one after that, Kenneth, and we provided well over $100 million to support that. But when you have these things, they destroy infrastructure. An infrastructure gap in Africa is anything between $68 billion to $108 billion a year. So even as we try to catch up with that, then you have all these external shocks and that destroy infrastructure that you have to now rebuild. And therefore, it's very important that we pay attention to how climate change affects our cities and how they will affect your cities in the future. In particular, cities that are I can call coastal cities are even more vulnerable. The World Bank estimated that West Africa coastal cities will lose $3.8 billion a year due to coastal erosion. Other estimates say that African countries will lose up to $7 billion a year due to coastal erosion. Therefore, building more climate-resilient infrastructure is critical for all cities, and even more so for those in the coastal areas. And to move this forward, I am delighted that I'm working with the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and myself, and also with the Global Center on Adaptation on what we call the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. That program is to mobilize $25 billion to support climate adaptation for Africa. And quite a lot of that will also go into how to build more resilient cities. In addition, for example, how do you look at the readiness of cities in the face of droughts, in face of floods and cyclones that I just talked about? How do we climate-proof our infrastructure to be able to support better climate-resilient infrastructure for our cities? Climate change may make some of our cities unlivable and have such vulnerabilities and heightened risks that will reduce their attractiveness for investors. It is therefore critically important that cities develop disaster risk management strategies, build city resilience frameworks, and climate adaptation plans. Vulnerability assessments, especially for informal settlements, it's important in the face of climate change. Dear mayors, the economic viability of your cities depends on the availability of energy for lighting, for cooking, for heating, for cooling, and for powering industries, as well as supporting millions of small and medium-sized enterprises and those in the informal service industries. Yet today, over 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity. Even right here in South Africa, that used to actually boast and have a lot of electricity. There's a lot of load shedding even going on here because of power outages. The African Development Bank is investing in energy. In fact, today, 83% of all of our investment, in fact, it's now 87%. 87% of all our investment in energy is in renewable energy. But God didn't make a mistake when He gave Africa so much sun. He didn't make a mistake when we have so much wind. I remember a story I should tell you, and this is all in the spirit of adaptive time management that has been introduced by my dear friend. But I'll just say, I remember the late, Big Sis, you will remember the late Itno, President Itno of Chad, Idris Deby. I remember going to visit with him. And when I got over there, I got to the airport. And the minister who met me shook my hands, and I quickly ran into the car. And the minister said, "Why are you leaving me on the tarmac?" And I said to the minister when I entered the car, "No, I'm so sorry. I didn't leave you on the tarmac. I just didn't want to have a cardiac arrest because the temperature was 48 degrees. It was so terrible that you could literally faint and die." So the word got to the 48 degrees. Yeah, the word got to the president that I left his minister at the side. And so when I got to the city, I met with the ambassadors just before seeing the president to ask them, what is the electricity access rate here in N'Djamena? And they told me it was 8%. So I went to the president, and he said, "Why did you leave my minister at the side of the road?" I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't want to have a cardiac arrest." I said, "Mr. President, I also asked the ambassadors on my way here, what is the electricity access rate?" I said, "They told me 8%. And he said to me, "Who has been lying to you?" And of course, I thought maybe I had 58% or 68%. And somehow I forgot. He said, "Because it is not 8%, it is 2%. And I said, "Mr. President, even God on the day of judgment will ask us questions. That the sun is the irradiation is so much, it burns your skin. Why is it that we cannot make it obligatory that every single household in N'Djamena will have to have a solar panel, and you take away taxes, you take away everything in terms of installation and maintenance to make sure that people can actually have a decentralized power system to power themselves in the city?" But I must tell you, it's great to have very leaders that drive for action. Sitting around me were ministers of finance and others. He gave an instruction, and within 7 days, that was put into place as a policy for them. So we know that we can do many of these things. Kenya, I lived in Kenya for 10 years. We have a project there that is called the Last Mile Connectivity Project. And the main problem that you have as mayors is that you can have electricity grid that goes through your city or your town, but the households are too poor to connect themselves to it. The connectivity fees are too high. In the case of Kenya, we decided as a bank to support the government to subsidize low-income households to be connected to the grid. It's called Last Mile Connectivity Project. We did it, and today, 2.6 million low-income households are connected to the grid right there in Kenya. And I went there one day. The minister of, I think the cabinet secretary was still here, but it was the minister of energy. And we got to this particular part of it. And I came by helicopter. And when we landed, everybody moved towards the helicopter. And right in front of me, as I was walking towards this village, was a lady whose name was Grace. Of course, my wife's name is Grace. So they say her name is Grace, and she was walking right in front of me, and she said, "Oh, welcome to our village." And the Minister of Energy, Cabinet Secretary, said, "Oh, by the way, Madam Grace, this is Dr. Adeshina, and he is the president of the African Development Bank. And the African Development Bank helped to connect all of your communities to the grid." She said something because you were talking about people. And also Vice Chancellor was talking about people at the center of public policy. And so she looked behind and she said, "I don't know African Development Bank. I don't know Dr. Adeshina. All I know is that we once were in darkness, and now we have light." That, I will never forget. People at the center of policy. Your Excellencies, there's no doubt in my mind that much still needs to be done to build our cities better. A key area that we must tackle is how to support cities and towns and mayors and governors to have greater access to financing, as well as greater autonomy in the management of their financing. I thought you would support me on that one, because I certainly support you with that. And that's why the African Development Bank Board of Directors approved for us in 2018 a new non-sovereign operations policy that now allows the bank to lend directly to decentralized entities such as cities, towns, and local governments. The bank has also recently established what we call the Urban Development Division to support our sector operations and to build knowledge on urban development in Africa. When I pushed for this at the bank, there was a reason for it. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very low-income neighborhood. And we didn't have water. We didn't have good sanitation. In fact, we didn't have good toilets. And I remember how difficult it was to live in those low-income neighborhoods. And there was a day that you just had dinner, so I'm not going to spoil your dinner. But it's not easy for those that do not have good water and sanitation services. And I grew up in those areas. And I know that policy is not theory. Policies must be practical, making sure that poverty shouldn't become the comparative advantage of Africa. And we have to make sure that we do everything to improve the lives of people fast and faster, because they can't wait. I lived in those areas. I grew up in those areas. So I know that we need to make sure that we have the financing to support cities to make things better for our people. The African Development Bank has also established what we call the Urban and Municipal Development Fund. This will enhance the provision of technical assistance and capacity building for integrated urban planning, governance, project preparation, and broader urban management, including municipal fiscal management. This fund will be providing support to more than 15 cities, and I hope many of those cities could be here today. Let me close now with some thoughts on how to better finance cities and how the African Development Bank can better support your efforts. We need innovative ways to tackle market dysfunctions and develop better mortgage financing in Africa to make cities more livable with access to affordable housing. Such approaches could include crowding in institutional investors. Now, who wants to live in a place in which it's just a sprawl of slums, and investors are not going to be walking around those areas? And so we have institutional investors in Africa today that got trillions of dollars of assets under management. We've got to be smarter of leveraging all of that into not urban infrastructure on water and sanitation, energy, but also urban housing in all of what we do. By promoting housing as an important asset class, supporting securitization and mortgage-backed securities, we will be able to attract asset managers and the private sector. Greater efforts are needed to also develop local and robust financial markets, the use of green bonds to support housing, the provision of technical assistance to financial institutions, and providing greater access to housing finance, in particular for women and for the youth. When I look around here, and in fact, when I was looking at your program, I saw you came from different places, and some actually outside of Africa. The bank can support and will support wider South-South and North-South collaboration and sharing of lessons and experiences on how to build livable cities and towns. Africa's urbanization is starting much later than other parts of the world. So great scope exists to learn from others that have achieved sustainable urbanization. There is need to provide greater autonomy. And I will be your vuvuzela. You know, in South Africa, when you want people to know that you're winning a game or something, what do you call it? Is that the vuvuzela? So you can adopt me as your vuvuzela blower for mayors and for governors to be able to advocate for greater fiscal autonomy and fiscal responsibility to our cities and our towns so that national governments will allow them to raise their own financing to meet the huge needs of development. When you go to a country and you see a road in a terrible shape, and it's called a federal road, for those of you that have federated units, the governor or the mayor of that city tells the population, sorry, I can't fix this because this road or this highway, it's not belonging to my town. It belongs to the federal government. Really? What do they care? You're telling me that it's a federal government problem? No, I think we have to have greater decentralization of the fiscality to support those that are on the ground. They know what the issues are. They respond to those issues. It's not about balkanization of the fiscal space. It's about accountability of the fiscal space to the needs of the people that you are seeing right in front of you. And so therefore, I think that the whole issue of simply looking at transfers from national governments to decentralized entities, mayors, local government, and so on, it's not enough. We must build institutional capacities at those decentralized levels to raise more robust financing. Apart from regular sources such as local taxes and levies, they should be strengthened and provided regulatory space to raise financing on local capital markets by posting more municipal and green bonds. This is especially important as studies have shown that debt by subnational entities only accounts for 4% of total debt of African countries. So where does the rest go, right? If all the mayors are in charge of all the places, what debt are we taking? If that debt is not translated into infrastructure, roads, water, sanitation, energy, good schools, good hospitals within the area, we have to rethink that. I look at a study by the UCLG of 153 cities in Africa, and they found something that really bogged my mind. 6.5% of the cities in Africa have access to credit. And this must change. There cannot be, and I'll emphasize again, there cannot be sustainable development of cities without access to low-cost and long-term financing of our cities. Jamie, Edgar, Madam Vice Chancellor, the work and agenda of the innovative partnership between the Big Win Philanthropy and the University of Cape Town on the African Mayoral Leadership Initiative, AMALI, is clearly going to be a game changer for urban development by building the leadership capacity to develop better and more livable cities in Africa. So thank you for all that work. I am excited that you, the mayors of our cities all across Africa, are here to look for ways to better achieve development and better development for our cities in Africa. We must achieve the Africa we want. And big sister Nkosazana Zuma, when you were at the African Union, that was the refrain that you and I used to talk about. But the Africa we want must be one where our cities are well planned to become drivers of greater economic growth and prosperity for Africa. And when you have a nicely done city, you feel you are developing with pride. And I'm a firm believer in the need for Africa to develop with pride. And this cannot happen by chance. The future is not created by a roll of the dice. the more we delay actions to transform our cities, the greater the costs to Africa's development. The cost of inaction. To develop better cities is higher than the cost of action. So let us act to transform African cities. I want to leave you with a great assurance that the African Development Bank and myself personally applaud the African Mayoral Leadership Initiative, and we stand fully ready to partner with you as you roll it out. When the word was being said by Edgar, he was very tactical. He was very adaptive in his introduction, but very focused and directed in where the adaptation was going. He kept looking always in my direction. And the governor of the Western Cape, he quickly reached out his hand towards me, and he said, "That is a partnership." So in the interest of deals and deals, I want to give you a deal that the African Development Bank will be by your side. We will support this. We will support the University of Cape Town to build its own capacity to do more of what you are doing. And I want to leave you with an assurance as mayors, count the African Development Bank as your partner. I will be your vuvuzela at every turn that we should have fiscal decentralization for you to be able to continue to do the great work that you are doing. Please continue that, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.